Should you learn how to read music? This is a frequently asked question by guitar and bass players, because in other instruments you basically have no choice and standard notation is the only way to write music. But in guitar and bass you can also write in tablature. So many players actually don't need to read music. Before I answer this question, I want to talk about different elements of reading music. The first thing is that many people get confused between music theory and reading music, and it's important to say that these are two different things. You can read exceptionally well and don't know anything about music theory, and vice versa. You can be pretty proficient with music theory and don't know how to read at all. So should you learn music theory is a different question that I won't answer in this video. Another thing is that people think they need to learn to read music to know the notes on the fretboard, and again, those are not the same. I think you should know every note on the fretboard, but again, you don't have to read sheet music to do that. One aspect of reading music that I think many musicians should learn is the rhythmic aspect of reading music. I think many musicians should know rhythmic values. You should know what is a 16th note, what is an 8th note, what is a tie, etc. Not just for theoretical purposes, but I think in most cases you play better and you accent the right notes when you understand what you do rhythmically. I also feel that many people think they learn to read music because they feel inferior when they see other musicians that know how to read. And this is a thing that you shouldn't take into consideration, because many brilliant musicians throughout history didn't know how to read, not because they were lazy. It's because some musicians actually don't need this skill of reading. So if you feel inferior, maybe you should address that feeling to improve your technique, your music theory, etc. So, who I think should learn to read music? Obviously classical musicians, jazz musicians. The reason is, of course, is that many of their repertoire is written in standard notation. For instance, if you play metal, most of the repertoire is written in tablature. But if you want to play classical music, obviously most of the repertoire is written in sheet music. Same goes for jazz repertoire. Also, if you want to be a session musician, you should learn how to read, because in some sessions you'll be asked to improvise, do what you want, but in other cases you'll be handed a music chart with a specific part that is in many cases written in standard notation. Now, who in my opinion shouldn't learn to read music? This may come to you as a surprise, but I think most beginners shouldn't learn to read music because they need to focus on their motor skills, on their technical skills, because playing well takes literally years, but reading music is a cognitive skill and it's easier to acquire. Many rock musicians, especially if they're hobbyists, they just want to play their favorite band's songs. Why would they spend time on reading music when they won't actually be reading? Also, musicians who only play their songs, they're not in a cover band, they're not a session musicians, they create their own music, so they don't have to write it to anyone, no one will read it. They are the ones who play their music, so they don't need to write it to anybody. Last two things that I think you should take into consideration whether or not you should learn to read. One thing is that when you choose to do something or learn something, you necessarily give up on another thing that you could have done in this time. At the time that you learned to read music, you could have learned or practiced something else that is more important. And one last thing is sometimes your gut just wants to learn something and you don't know why. And some things that you learn in life, they're not fruitful immediately. You will only see the fruits later on in your life. So if it itches you to learn something, then you can just go for it.